Hello everyone and welcome to the Commercial Awareness Compass, your weekly guide to developing commercial insight that goes beyond just the headlines. Each week we take one major story and break it down to help you progress through 3 levels: beginner, intermediate and advanced commercial awareness. Whether you're just starting out or already have some understanding, this program is here to help you think like a commercial lawyer. By the end of today's session, you'll have practical insights that you can use in applications and interviews. So my name is Daniel Shepherd. I'm a law conversion student and a future trainee solicitor. And today I'm joined by Emma, a solicitor with extensive experience in commercial law, and she'll help us explore today's key legal and business topic, offering insight in how lawyers tackle complex commercial challenges. So welcome, Emma. How are we doing today?
Thank you, Dan. I'm glad to be back. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good, thank you. It's nice weather, so I can't complain too much. So to start, would you like to break down this week's story?
Well, I'll try because it's a theme this week. So we're going to take a little bit of not a different direction. We're going to make sure we've got the consistency here at the Compass, but try and build it out a little bit more for you and try something wider. So we're looking at clients' pressure on law firms to use AI. And as Dan mentioned, there is a specific story about this. So there's something that's inspired this theme. And there's lots of research at the moment out there that can back up this claim as to why this pressure is happening and where it's coming from. But it'd be good to explore the client view and the law firm view and what can be done at each stage of commercial awareness to make sure that we can break this down effectively.
Nice one. So what are the key legal and business concepts involved in this?
Lots and lots. So I'll start with just explaining briefly about the research that's prompted this conversation today. So Thomson Reuters has completed some research that highlights a big shift really in the legal industry, where in the main it's corporate clients are increasingly expecting law firms to adopt Gen AI. And what that means essentially is that we as in-house lawyers are looking at our law firm counterparts to prove and to evidence and to use readily Gen AI in the advice that they're providing. And why would that be? Of course, that's to make things cheaper and a lot more streamlined and efficient, because we know that the way the legal industry works, it's all commercial, it's commercial awareness everywhere, and it's just money. It's who brings in the money, where's that money coming from? It's clients. And then if we think about the key theme, Dan, which is, well, the business of law and how it all works. If you get a demand from your client that is really strong and you don't step up to that, then you could be left behind. So we'll explore some of those things today.
So as we explore that, why does this issue matter, particularly to businesses and law firms?
It matters because of the evolution of businesses in the legal industry. If you aren't keeping up with anything, whether that's law, regulations, the way of working, you are again going to be left behind, because law firms are constantly looking for competitive advantages. And the way that they do that is by keeping the client happy. So it matters for that reason. It matters to make the business sustainable and have longevity. It matters to have those watching still be able to have opportunities to train there, because if there's no money coming in, there's no point in training new lawyers, and there's no point in having the succession planning there if they aren't profitable. We need to stay ahead of the game of things. And if there are options to, again, make things, a service cheaper and quicker, then that's the fundamentals of any business, right? Whether we're talking law firms or not. So that's what the main reasons why it's important.
So it's a story of changing expectations around what companies are expecting, or in-house lawyers are expecting from working with outside law firms.
Definitely, absolutely. And we are seeing that now in tenders. So for those who don't know what a tender is, or an RFP, which is a request for proposal, you might also see RFI, which is a request for information, which is a stage before an RFP. But when a in-house company or a corporate client is looking for a panel of law firms, they will issue a tender out to law firms and ask them certain questions. And what we are now seeing within tenders is not only what's your scope, what areas of law do you cover, how long have you been formed, what are your insurance certificates, etc. There's now questions within tenders that are being reported, how are you using Gen AI in your practice? How has it been adopted from lots of different angles, which we can explore today? But it's key. If whether you're awarded business depends on your scoring and questions, many questions, including an AI one, then of course it's going to be top of mind for lots of law firm owners, founders, partners, etc.
And I think this might be quite an interesting topic because it quite nicely latches onto a lot of other episodes that we've done about changing technologies and how it kind of influences different stories. So I think it's going to be a really interesting one to break down. But we'll move on into the intermediate level now that we've covered the basics. How would a law student or someone in the commercial awareness compass kind of break down this sort of topic in a way that's manageable?
I have a technique that we can use, and some may have heard of this before. If you haven't, don't worry. If you have, great, then you'll be well appraised with it. But when I'm faced with something so big like this that just seems like, do I even have enough information to mention it or even approach a conversation around it, because you don't want to be feeling like you don't know as much as you're letting on, or the other way around. This is a really good technique that you can use to break it down and get it a lot clearer in your mind so that you can have these conversations in interviews or certain rooms that you're in. And it's called the SWOT technique, SWOT. You commonly see it written in capitals. And it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So it's a great way of breaking something down. The way that you would usually see it is on a matrix on a piece of paper. So if you imagine a piece of paper, you would draw a cross in the middle of it and you put SWOT, or whichever way, if I'm mirrored in my camera, in each of the corners, and you'd write down, well, with this that we have in mind, so to bring it to life, with Gen AI for law firms, what are the strengths that presents for them? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities? And what are the threats? And then before you know it, you've got a well-founded base of knowledge about the subject. So I don't know if you want to explore that together now, Dan. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll do it. We'll do it one at a time then. So, what would you say are some of the strengths that we can look at in this?
Strengths. So competitive advantage. If you go for this and you start integrating it really well, then a huge strength of it would be to have it ahead of the game. You've got efficiencies, you've got the marketing angle of a law firm. So if you can say we are adopting this, then that becomes a huge strength of the law firm. It could be that it aligns with a vision, so it enhances the vision of a law firm strategically. Vision is usually a statement that's set in stone by a board of any business. Lots of different things that you could put in there. And the great thing about this technique is that I'm sure a lot of you now will be screaming at the screen, like, what about this? What about that? And you are probably right. You know, this, it really makes it basic. It nails it down as to, well, actually, this isn't that complicated. There's loads of strengths that I can think of, Emma. Why are you not mentioning these? Well, that's the whole point of introducing this technique, I guess. So lots more things that I would add there. And I don't know if, Dan, you're thinking the same thing. Like, is this a strength? Is this not? But yeah, that's what a couple of the main things that I would put in there. But completing a SWOT technique, you could spend hours and hours on it. So yeah, have a think about that as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking that there's so many different angles that you can think of, especially with how quickly things are developing. I guess that's one of the things with this sort of stuff, this sort of story, that the strengths will change and develop over time. So you may be able to come back to this and go, oh, this wasn't prevalent there, but now it is, and it
Yes.
moves forward, which is quite interesting. But now that we've covered the strengths, what about the weaknesses?
So weaknesses of adopting this. So you could be putting yourself at risk, couldn't you? You could be putting yourself at risk of lots of different compliancy elements, but also it could be that you adopt it and it's not as good as anyone else's, so it becomes a weakness for you. So if I've been, as an in-house lawyer, I've had lots of AI tools marketed at me and sat on demos and things, and you get to compare them. And if a law firm was saying, you know, this is the best thing for document review and we can make sure your commercial contracts are reviewed a lot quicker, and then it just falls flat and doesn't do what it's supposed to do, a weakness could be that it sets you back by adopting it, so it's thinking of it the other way around. It could be that it's going to cost a lot of money to do. So something that I should have mentioned in the introduction to this is that you've got two elements to it that we can bring in as well, which is that law firms might be designing their own Gen AI internally, or they might be relying on third parties as well. So there's different, and that would maybe go into the opportunities, so I'm getting ahead of myself. But if you think of the weaknesses, there'll be different ones depending on which model you go for as well. And it will cost money, and it might mean that you have a hole in your budget that you haven't yet recuperated, so you're thinking about it that way. There's a couple of weaknesses that I would think about.
And what about the opportunities?
Opportunities. So if you are an optimist, you could say it could create more jobs. It could create more jobs for a law firm, because if you're designing it internally, then you will need people that know what they're talking about across the law and technology to be able to get this off the ground and to build it. And this was the conversation that we were having, 2-3 years ago. It was trending a lot about, do lawyers need to learn how to code? And some will argue against that, some will argue for, but it will hopefully create jobs. Opportunities are obviously to be able to pitch yourself in that market as a leading provider of legal services that uses AI for clients. You can gain clients through it if research like this is true and it's seen as fully valid. Then if you're one of the first to put on your responses to tenders that yes, we've got a really strong AI policy, we've got a really great piece of kit, we can serve all of your needs by doing this, then you're going to get more clients. And then a final opportunity obviously is by getting in more money, because it's going to cost you less to do the things in the same, it's going to cost you less to do the things because it's going to be running through AI and it's going to take less time. But you might be able to charge similar, I don't know. So we'll see if that brings in profits as well. But that's the whole idea of AI, isn't it? That it can do that.
And as we round out this technique, what would the threats be?
Big threat could be breach of confidentiality, depending on what model you go for. So you would need to make sure that you are locked down and it's closed loop. And if you're putting client names, client information, really sensitive data into this thing, any kind of personal data, you've got to be really careful. We've spoken recently on the Commercial Awareness Compass about cyber attacks. You've got a risk of that and that being breached and being leaked. Threats are also you entering into a kind of new market-ish. You're still providing legal services, but you've got to think about your business strategy from that point of view as well. So you've got competitors like Microsoft, like huge, they're a threat to you. So competitors should always be in the threat box of a SWOT technique. What others? Legislation. There's a new AI Act that's due. How is that going to impact? You might build something and then you might have to change it all. And then flipping it on its head with the first opportunities that we mentioned about jobs. This could reduce jobs and the workforce requirement. We're all facing that at the moment, no matter what industry you're in. So I think it would be remiss if you didn't mention that and acknowledge it too.
And I think we'll, when we move on into the advanced session, we'll kind of pick up on a lot of the different areas of this tech, or different pros and cons and such, and we'll expand on them. But I think what's really nice about the SWOT technique is as you work through your strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, you realize how it kind of goes in a bit of a circle and, this links nicely to this, and it brings out more opportunity, more ideas. And I think by the time, if you've done the, let's say you do one or two strengths, one or two weaknesses for each one, by the time that you've done, you've probably thought of 20 or 30 or 40 different versions that you're able to bring out really well into an interview. And if you can show that level of thinking and relating one to the next, I think it will look really, really good.
That's right. You've got it. You've got the technique down.
Yeah, to say that I'd not heard of it prior to this session, I've already mastered it. We'll not go that far. But we'll move into the advanced session of this now. So you touched upon it a little bit, but as one of the threats. But what about the ethical considerations when we're talking about AI? I think that's one of the big conversations around AI, especially at the moment.
It is, isn't it? And with the code of conduct that we have as lawyers, and we're expected to act in accordance with our ethics, etc., best interests of the client. Like, I'm not going to go into that whole thing. There's lots of nuances there, but we need to make sure that whatever we do, whatever we are in charge of, whilst we are in charge of this AI thing at the moment, some would say it's getting a bit scary, but we're in control of it. And if we're offering some sort of service through AI, we need to make sure that it's ethical use of that. And that it's not exploitative in any way. We are still accountable as lawyers for the advice that we give out, even if it's produced by AI. So having that human in the loop is very important still from an ethical point of view. We are nowhere near that point where you could just ask any piece of kit for advice, in my opinion, and not review it and not have a legal sound mind go over that and check it before it goes out, because you could be giving false advice, you could be giving exaggerated opinions. There's lots of different things that we have to do as lawyers before we present advice to clients. So you've got that ethical thing as well. AI can make errors, and firms just really need to make sure that they're hot on challenges such as that before they start marketing it. And that's why I would say, amongst other reasons, it's taking longer to catch up with these client expectations that we've been speaking about, because clients are like, oh, you need to use it and therefore it's going to drive my price down, because all of these tools are available. But if you think about it, if we were to receive advice purely from AI at the moment, a client wouldn't be happy with that either. It's got to be compliant, and firms have also got a high reputation to maintain. So there's this huge gap that we need to think about when it comes to operating it ethically as well.
Yeah, because I guess there's so many different ways in which it can be used, and whether it's used as kind of more of a companion or more of a for the grunt work, I guess, or what's it? And firms are kind of trying to find that balance at the moment, which seems to some are more adopting it in different ways than others. So as we talk about the ethical considerations as well, this is me using the SWOT technique, thinking a bit more outside the box. But I guess firms also have a bit of an ESG concern when it comes to like environmental concern when it comes to law firms. I think so. When it comes to using AI, I think I saw a report not too long since, which we might even cover on another episode, about how firms are portraying themselves in certain ways with energy consumption and such, whereas what they're actually using, I guess that's another angle that firms need to be very wary of, obviously, with the energy consumption of AI.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I'd not thought about that before, Dan. Especially with, I think ChatGPT came out recently because there's a trend on TikTok talking about how important it is to be polite to the robots because they might come back to you. And ChatGPT has said that people being polite and using please and thank yous and trying to like send extra messages to the machine to make sure it knows that it's grateful for its help is costing it a load of money because of the amount of responses it's having to generate. So with that, so that's just how my mind works. So if I'm, and it might be a technique for the audience to use. So if someone presents you with something like Dan just has to me, and it was a new concept to me, I try and liken it to something else. So how is it like something else? And then I can then go on to explain just the inner workings of a lawyer. But yeah, so how I liken it to that as well. Well, of course, if law firms are going to be using it more for more queries, etc., like how much is it going to have an impact on the environment with the E part of ESG, and obviously the social pressures, and then the G, governance, is going to be huge within this, with the policies that we've spoken about, making sure that everyone in the firm knows how they can and cannot use AI. There are some firms that have come out outwardly and said you cannot use it whatsoever, which is also a bit draconian, archaic, I think. And then how's that received by clients? Clients are commented on LinkedIn saying that's not the right way to go. I wouldn't want to be your client if you're not using it. So there's a balance, isn't there, to reach. But to bring in ESG here is really clever. And if you can do that and bring in ESG to your SWOT and then mention it in an interview as well, if you're interested in it, that would be a really great way to set yourself apart as well.
And I think another way, this also is on the back of what you've just mentioned, with certain firms adopting it and certain firms not. what sort of firms might not be adopting it, and kind of how can that make a power imbalance between law firms? Obviously, with some bigger firms adopting it and some smaller ones, maybe, as we mentioned earlier, the financials of being able to afford such technology. What sort of impact could that have?
It could have a huge impact if you think about accessibility and things like that. So, like the size of law firm and the amount of budgetary reserves it has to invest in something like this, those are going to be the ones that, again, lead, have the monopoly, make more money out of it. But the smaller firms, if it's just not in their budgetary confinement to be able to build something or purchase something, then very sadly they could be left behind again. So it's making that decision, isn't it, strategically from a business point of view, like what's worthwhile spending on at the moment and what isn't. Nobody is going to hang around for a business that's left behind and hasn't kept up with the times. But it's really sad when you put it that way, that if you think about the impact on clients, because, we've seen this trend with legal aid before, people who genuinely need legal advice, and that support is dwindling, that's come publicly, and then might that fade out. It's just another accessibility trend, isn't it, that is unfortunately being left behind through opportunities that we have. And for those lay people that need advice from a smaller firm, of course that there'll still be a need for that and they'll still be there. But if AI can do that, or if other firms are offering it cheaper, then the smaller firms definitely need to keep up, don't they? It's like the future of the high street law firm, for example.
Yeah.
And then is it only going to be the huge corporate clients, big names, that can afford to benefit from this, when really who should be the ones benefiting from it is the ones who really need to drive down costs. So it's another great element to think about.
And kind of leading into that, obviously, we're talking about what sort of firms are going to be able to adopt this and what might not be able to. What proactive steps can law firms make in order to kind of seize the opportunities with the implementation of AI? Kind of as a big picture, what opportunities can this create for them?
Some steps that they can take is the right recruitment, I suppose, because we're all talking about it, but who really knows enough to put their name to a piece of kit to be able to make a law firm more money? Those people must be few and far between. So recruitment in this area must be quite hot. Development of future employees. So a lot of law firms are bringing in AI elements to seats, for example, or advertising for those that are interested in legal ops to train in the company. I've seen a lot of people who have trained as lawyers and then hopped over to the legal ops element of that big firm and gone into legal technology, which is also interesting. So what law firms can do is start to create those opportunities in recruitment, because those that are watching now might be thinking, I want to safeguard my career in future. How do I do it? Law firms want to safeguard their business. So why don't you come together and take advantage of those things if that's what you're really interested in? They could also be reviewing the market, so doing their own SWOT, so to speak, reviewing the market, seeing what's out there and what's possible, first of all, because we're also within the realms of the limits of what technology can do at the moment, but also making sure that whatever they bring out is in line with the market. So if they're competing for business from a client, they can stay ahead. Also, I've mentioned this a few times, but I'll go into a little bit more detail here, is policies. So you'll need policies internally, like you would any other HR and employment policy. So you might have a social media policy within a law firm. They also need to have AI policies in terms of the restraints of what they can and can't use it for, how they can talk about it, what tools they can and can't use. So I would imagine it would say, don't use any open loop. Don't put any client information into here. This is why. And then what the ramifications of that could be. Is there disciplinaries for people? We're getting quite serious, but there's lots of different ways that a firm can take proactive steps to minimize, the risks of this. And then building into the second part of the question, which was like opportunities, what's in it for them? Again, it's just getting a bigger market share in terms of the offering that they can give.
And I know we've mentioned it a few times. Obviously, it's such a quickly updated and right, everything's changing very quickly with this sort of story with AI and what its capabilities are and how firms are willing to use it. That I guess those firms that are on top of that and keeping an eye out for how it's changing, especially on the policy front. I know you mentioned that there's an AI Act that's supposed to be coming in. Do you know when that's roughly meant to be coming in?
Very good question. It's in. I think it's in the review stages now in government. But yeah, you're right. There's an AI Act that's coming in, so you could get ahead of time and have a look at what that might mean in terms of restraints. Because if you're building tech or procuring tech at the moment and it isn't in line with the legislation as it is to be, then you need to make sure that that's there as well. So it's another huge thing that law firms should be doing to protect themselves.
Yeah, and I think that does nicely round out the advanced session. Obviously, it is such a big, interesting topic, and I think if we'd have done a full SWOT technique, we could probably have been going for a few hours just with how massive this topic is. But for those that are listening, I think it is a really important technique that they can use not only for this one, but for multiple different episodes. And yeah, well, thank you anyway today, Emma, and thank you for those that have tuned in and listening today. Remember, commercial awareness isn't just about following the news. It's about understanding how these developments shape business decisions and legal strategies. Whether you're just starting out or thinking like a commercial advisor, always ask, how does this impact clients and what can a law firm do to help? Join us next week to keep building your commercial awareness. And until then, prepare without the panic. Thank you.